The federal government says that it will step in to restrict online gambling games which currently can be accessed by adults but also kids on their mobile phones for free. Social casino gamings, as they're called, have become a multi-billion-dollar industry. They look and sound pretty much like a poker machine, just a little bit smaller, but you can't play for real money. They, as a result, fall outside Australia's existing ban on casino gambling online. But researchers found that adolescents who play these simulated pokies are at much higher risk of developing gambling problems themselves. The government plans to apply an R18+ rating on any online games that imitate gambling. But big question, it's a very big question, is will that work? The ABC's Casey Briggs has been reporting on this and he takes a look.
They look like slot machines. They sound like slot machines. Just like slot machines, they promise...
watch it spin and watch you win.
But here's the thing, you can't win. You'll never strike it rich playing these games because the jackpots, they pay out in virtual coins and there's no way to cash them out.
We found in our research that young people are certainly playing these games.
In the privacy of your own home, in a work break, whenever you want to, because you've always got a phone in your hand. They should be banned.
This is the world of social casinos and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. The games are free to play to an extent. If you run out of virtual coins, you'll be prompted to buy more. The social casino industry is no game. It's dominated by some of the world's biggest names in gambling. There's a chance you've been bombarded with ads like this on social media.
Yes, yes. Look at that huge win.
Ads that contain the kinds of messages that wouldn't be legal if this was a gambling service.
Gambling has been around for a very long time, will continue to be. This is the next form of it, this is the next era.
And now the federal government's stepping in.
There is growing community concern around the harms.
So, is this harmless fun, or is it putting the pokies in your pocket?
The ABC's Casey Briggs with that report, and thanks to the magic of television, Casey's here now. Hello, mate.
Isn't it remarkable? Hello, John. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Just give us a sense, how popular are these sort of pokey-like games, and how good is the evidence that kids are actually playing them?
Yeah, I mean, it's worth just kind of re-underlining the point, because sometimes a thing comes along that walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it sounds like a duck, it smells like a duck, but it ain't a duck in this case, because these are video games. And the reason for that is these companies, some of them very big gambling companies, have taken out the one thing that makes them gambling, and that is risking your money for something of value. There are millions of players of these games around the world. Aristocrat Leisure, a big gambling company, owns a suite of these games. It boasts...
So the same people that are building the pokies are building these no money versions for your phone.
Exactly, and in fact they share some of the same branding and names, and you know, the games actually mirror what you can find in venues, but they boast millions of active players a day. They are making hundreds of millions of dollars a year out of these games. And you know, these social casino games are about a quarter of Aristocrat's annual revenue just from this non-gambling
So
product.
people aren't risking money, but they are paying to get the games, so it's a different form of revenue for them. Now, on the surface of it, Casey, this seems a little bit, I mean, it looks very sinister. It looks like big tobacco companies making those old candy cigarettes, the packs of fags you used to get in the corner shop. But that's, I guess, only a problem if you can prove that this goes on to not just be another form of consumption, but it is a gateway to gambling. How good is the research to say that this is creating another generation of gamblers?
And that is certainly the concern of researchers and gambling advocates. The research is pretty clear that there is definitely an overlap between the people who play these games and engage in online gambling, casino gambling, the pokies in venues. It's a little less clear if one leads to the other. Playing these games leads you to then go on and gamble, or playing the gambling games leads you to go and play these games. Obviously, people that are interested in one are likely to be interested in the other. But there are studies that have found adolescents in particular that went to play these games and spent money on coins in these games, they're more likely to then go on and gamble and in fact go on and have and develop gaming disorder. So there is some evidence, it's evidently enough evidence for the federal government to step in and decide kids should not be playing these games. While it's a little still unclear, because a lot of this is survey-based, part of the problems with research in this field is people who are spending money in these games don't even necessarily always know how much they're spending, because you do it through app stores. You kind of click, yes, I'll spend this money, and you don't necessarily even realise quite how much you've spent until maybe you check your bill from Apple or Google, at the end of the month, but you're not necessarily even sure at the time.
So what form would a ban take? Is the technology there, or is this going to be kind of like the equivalent of putting a little R18 sticker on a Eminem CD in the 90s, as if kids are going to worry about that?
I mean, it is basically the same classification scheme as the movies, as the Eminem CD. So there is a question there about how effective it might be. If a parent would have put parental locks on their child's phone, this would probably prevent them from downloading and playing these games. But, a lot of teens we know don't have those sorts of controls on their phones. I think the government is also trying to send a message here to parents to say, hey, pay attention to this. There are harms in these games. And probably a lot of parents aren't aware of these games. These are, dinky little phone games in lots of ways. You look at them and you don't even think they amount to that much. It's a real surprise when you find out how profitable they are, how many people are playing. And 12 to 25% of adolescents have played these games. So I think the government is also trying to say to parents, we think that there is some concern here. Lots of kids are playing them. Lots of adults are playing them as well. And there is risk involved.
Yeah, John, what do you think of the idea of banning this, though? Because I guess viewed in one light, we're saying to kids, we're going to ban you from doing something under the age of 18 that is perfectly legal for you to do. In fact, we've got over 100,000 of these things in New South Wales alone. You can do it no trouble at all. And yet we're going to allow you to do completely illegal things on games like shoot people, drive cars too fast, all the things that make kids like video games. It's a little bit sort of topsy-turvy, isn't it?
I think we need to take into account the fact that these machines are designed, the technology that is invested into them are all designed around hooking, including the music, including the tones. There was that AFL player from Melbourne, one of the captains of the team, I can't remember his name now, who said he had to hand all his money over to his wife because he couldn't even walk past, because as soon as he heard the sound and the ringing of the bells, he would be drawn into that machine. We have regulations around smoking and advertising. We have regulations around alcohol and advertising in sporting venues. You cannot watch a game of sport of any code without at the start of the game, at the middle of the game, at the end of the game, being told the odds that you can gamble. We are not being cognizant of the harms we're creating. Many young people have got their parents now to set up gambling apps, and they've started to lose their pocket money on the punt on the weekend, and that terrifies me of what are we teaching the children of our next generation.
Emma, do you think the important distinction here that John draws, that these, because they are mimicking poker machines that have been very cleverly designed and evolved over decades to become more and more psychologically addictive to us, that I guess I'm still flailing for the right analogy. Is it a bit like when we see big tobacco going into vaping? That's our clue that this is this is grooming people for addiction.
I think that's the perfect comparison. I think that's exactly what's going on here. And I think you can see that intuitively from even looking at the games that we were seeing then. They're clearly imitating that experience. And I think habituating kids in particular to that kind of gambling and that kind of way of looking at life and looking at sport in particular. I think John's point is so important. Like having young kids who are kind of on phones and iPads. Luckily, like we're still in the ABC Kids window, so I've got a bit of time left. But having that and kids who are getting into AFL footy and having this onslaught, this constant onslaught of gambling and this kind of framing of that's how we value things, that's how we value achievement around this kind of monetary reward is, as a parent and just kind of somebody who exists in society, like that is really concerning. So it is heartening for me at least to see that the government is kind of trying at least to get on the front foot with this and recognizing that this is a problem and a continually evolving problem. Those big companies, those gambling companies, tobacco companies will continue to search out loopholes and new markets, and particularly young markets. So seeing this kind of action and legislative action, I think is really heartening.
Yeah, Sally, if this is such a profitable revenue stream for the poker machine manufacturers, as Casey suggests, are you expecting a frantic lobbying effort against this proposed ban on kids accessing these games?
It's if you talk about it more, does it create more awareness and understanding on a parent's behalf? Because I know ABC Kids, we're in that phase as well, but we're also using some apps that are learning apps that are recommended by our school, but they're along the same vein of, if you press this button, you've got this amount of coins and you can put them in this treasure box, or this treasure box, and you can win a prize. So that's happening at grade prep. So it's insidious, and I think that there will be lobbying. Of course there will be lobbying because there's so much money involved. But I do think it's really important to, parenting's hard. There's a lot to keep an eye on, and screen time is a really big deal, and setting those boundaries are a really big deal. The gaming industry is massive. We have a lot of young teenage boys in our life, and they're all, if they're not playing sport on a weekend, for the rest of the weekend they're in their room gaming. The industry is massive, and it's really hard as a parent to police that. I know my 6-year-old has been coming home and talking about Minecraft as if he knows anything about Minecraft and Roblox, which has been identified as a site for child predators, that this is being talked about all the time. So, the pressure's coming, the drums are beating in our house to, can we play Minecraft? And I think as parents, it's a really hard thing to police, but the awareness is really important about it. But of course, there'll be lobbying because it's about money, and that's how it works.
We're not talking about banning these apps or these games. We're talking about putting the right controls and restrictions on them. Ban something, it'll go underground. But we're saying, we don't let kids drink because we know what the research says in their brain development. The same holds for gambling.
But Tarang, I guess every sport now is a form of gambling. If a kid is playing, FIFA World Cup soccer on a mobile device or at home, they can become a gambling addict with just another app on their phone, and it's kind of legal.
Yeah, the gamification of it's a real issue, as well as the idea that we're going to regulate through having parents or government intervene, as though young boys and men or young girls, young people of any gender, but particularly building on that example of young boys and men, like they're going to listen to either of those two sources, because they have a distrust, a healthy distrust of government, I should say, and an active dislike, and contempt of their parents, and at best a tolerance that they exist. The idea that parents are going to say, hey, don't do that, and it's going to go anywhere, that's a pipe dream. I think the reality is that we need figures being utilised in the same way that, public figures are utilised to promote gambling, right? We need the opposite of that for younger people. We need public figures, whether it's sporting figures and things, saying, hey, don't get into this stuff. It's actually not that cool. But otherwise, at the moment, we're just grooming them to become addicts.
So, Casey, if these are effectively banned, is it too cynical to think that, well, the people that are currently making the games that look like poker machines, they'll just redesign it so it looks more like Candy Crush, and they'll find a way around whatever law gets written? Yeah,
two things just to say very quickly. One, we're saying young people are playing these games because that's what the research is saying. The industry does dispute that. The industry says very few young people are playing these games, and it, on paper at least, says it supports age ratings. Now, it hasn't looked at this particular scheme. That is a general comment on age rating schemes. But the other thing we know, to your question, John, is that gambling companies are very good at exploiting any grey areas and any loopholes in laws. And by way of example, let me show you this. I'm holding is one of the Aristocrat-owned social casino games. It's a game called Heartthrob within a game called Lightning Link. There's also a Lightning Link range of pokies, of gaming machines you can play in venues. One of the Lightning Link games you can play in a venue is called Heartthrob. So there are shared names, there are shared logos, there are shared games. Now, we all know it's illegal to advertise a gaming machine, in public outside of a gaming venue. You're not allowed to do that in Australia. Real question here, real grey area here. If you're advertising a game that shares the name, shares the logo, shares the mechanics, shares the gameplay, shares everything about that kind of gaming machine, except it's not a gaming machine, how is that not indirectly advertising the gaming machine?
Yep,
It's called Heartthrob.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yes, no one should play it though.
I can remember when the big tobacco companies started getting their own brands of cologne, ironically enough, so they could keep their brand out
there. If you can hook a kid by the time they're 18 to cigarettes,
right,
you know you've got a good chance you'll keep them for life.
Yeah.
Right. How does that science still not hold here?
Great story, Casey. Thanks for coming in to